Good afternoon, everyone. The Secretary General delivered his address to the World Economic Forum in Davos today. He outlined how climate change and ungoverned artificial intelligence are two profound threats that demand much more attention and intelligent collaboration than they are receiving, as they threaten to upend life as we know it. He called out parts of the private sector that are actively backtracking on climate goals, telling them, "You are short-sighted and on the wrong side of history." To the corporate leaders who remain committed to climate action, the Secretary General went on to say, "Your leadership is needed now more than ever. Do not back down. Stay on the right side of history." Regarding artificial intelligence, the Secretary General underscored how, through the Global Digital Compact, the United Nations is working with governments, industry, and civil society to ensure that AI becomes a tool of opportunity, inclusion, and progress for all people. In remarks afterwards, the Secretary General said that we have witnessed in recent days in Gaza as an example of robust diplomacy that should be recognized. The Secretary General also participated in the annual off-the-record IG Well lunch organized by the World Economic Forum, and he also continued with a number of bilateral meetings. This morning, Carlos Ruiz Massieu, the head of the UN verification mission in Colombia, briefed Security Council members. He said that as last year ended, Colombians celebrated the 8th anniversary of the peace agreement, but that tragically the first days of the year have been marred by violence in the Catatumbo region of northeast Colombia. This has resulted in the deaths of dozens of people, including former combatants, signatories of the peace agreement, as well as local leaders and members of communities. Thousands of people have also been displaced. Mr. Ruiz Massieu called again for armed groups to cease all actions that place at risk the civilian population and to allow unhindered access for humanitarian responders. Local teams of the verification mission have assisted in the evacuation of at-risk persons, including ex-combatants from the areas of confrontation, and UN humanitarian colleagues are offering their support to the affected population, he said. And you will have seen that the Secretary General also issued a statement calling for an immediate cessation of violence and reiterating the importance of fully implementing the final peace agreement as the cornerstone for consolidating peace in Colombia. And this afternoon, Council members will hear from the Secretary General's Special Representative on Haiti, Maria Isabel Salvador, and the Executive Director of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, Gadi Wali. Staying on Colombia, where earlier today, the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, Maria Villaforner, together with the government, launched the 2025 Humanitarian Response Plan for Community Priorities. It seeks $342 million to address the urgent needs of 2 million of the most vulnerable people in the country, where more than 9 million people need assistance this year. The plan focuses on empowering local communities and responders, particularly in critical areas such as the Pacific region and the border with Venezuela. Women, children, and indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities remain the most affected by conflict and climate-related emergencies in Colombia. We welcome the release of the 25-member crew of the Galaxy Leader cargo ship that was taken hostage in November 2023 while transiting the Red Sea. In a statement, Hans Grünberg, our special envoy for Yemen, said that this is a step in the right direction. He urged Ansar Allah to continue these positive steps on all fronts, including ending all maritime attacks. These measures are critical in improving the space for mediation, he added, which in the long term will facilitate the resumption of the Yemeni political process that millions of Yemenis have been yearning for. Mr. Grünberg also expressed his gratitude to the Sultanate of Oman for its determined and tireless efforts to advocate for the release of the Galaxy Leader crew. For his part, the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, Arsenio Dominguez, stated that IMO will continue to rigorously uphold its commitment to the safety of seafarers worldwide who continue to face risks in their essential work. We reaffirm the importance of ensuring that international law be respected in full in relation to maritime navigation. Thanks. The Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process ad interim, Sigrid Kaag, visited southern and central Gaza today. This is her first visit since the ceasefire started on the 19th of January. In Khan Yunis, she visited a newly built temporary learning space where 3,000 children get education, supported by UNICEF. Ms. Kag also spoke with children and mothers at a nutrition center and a center focused on mental health and psychosocial support. The special coordinator has so far held several meetings in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory and continues to engage the countries of the region. She also spoke earlier this week with Kaya Kallas, the Vice President of the European Commission, about the situation in the OPT. Meanwhile, our colleagues from the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs say that the UN and our partners are seizing every opportunity presented by the ceasefire to step up our support to people across the Gaza Strip. This includes increasing the flow of incoming supplies and deliveries, as well as scaling up storage capacity, repair work, life-saving services, and needs and damage assessments. OCHA says the UN and our partners are dispatching incoming supplies to designated emergency shelters and distribution centers across the Gaza Strip. We're distributing food parcels and flour and working to reopen bakeries. Yesterday and Monday, our UNRWA colleagues distributed 118 trucks of more than 53,000 food parcels to communities in Khan Yunis and to the UNRWA shelters in Deir al-Bala. The UN Population Fund says that yesterday, 20 trucks carrying critical supplies, including for safe births, emergency obstetric care, postpartum kits, contraceptives, and winter items, were offloaded in Deir al-Bala. 20 more trucks carrying UNFPA assistance are entering northern Gaza today. The UN Office for Project Services, UNOPS, is distributing fuel to ensure that critical services such as healthcare and water pumping and desalination can run on backup generators in the absence of electricity. The UN and our partners are also supporting infrastructure repairs, including to water wells and desalination plants. Our humanitarian partners are carrying out rapid assessments in newly accessible areas to identify people's most urgent needs, including water, hygiene, sanitation, and healthcare. They're also stepping up disease surveillance efforts. We and our partners are setting up trauma stabilization points to handle emergency cases and are mobilizing specialized care teams. We also have an update on the situation in Jenin in the West Bank. OCHA warns that the ongoing operation by Israeli forces in Jenin is putting people's safety and welfare at risk, while destroying infrastructure as basic as roads, electricity, and water pipes. 10 people have reportedly been killed, with dozens more injured. OCHA warns that since yesterday, the Jenin government hospital has been disconnected from the water grid and electricity network. It relies on dwindling water reserves from emergency tanks that were installed just weeks ago in preparation for such situations, through an allocation by the Occupied Palestinian Territory Humanitarian Fund, which is managed by OCHA. Our partners are set to refill water and fuel reserves at the hospital as soon as they secure access to the facility. Yes. Thanks. According to a new food security assessment, nearly a third of Lebanon's population is facing acute food insecurity following the escalation of conflict in late 2024. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Analysis on Lebanon, developed by the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program, and the Ministry of Agriculture, shows that some 1.65 million people in Lebanon are now facing crisis or emergency levels of food insecurity, which is IPC Phase 3 or above, up from 1.26 million before the escalation. Meanwhile, 201,000 people are grappling with emergency levels, which is IPC Phase 4, twice the number as before. The report projects that food insecurity is expected to persist over the next 3 months, with no short-term return to pre-crisis conditions. With challenges ahead, ongoing humanitarian efforts in supporting recovery will be critical. The full study is online. Moving to Syria, where we and our humanitarian partners continue to support the response across the country as security permits. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that from the 14th to the 20th of January, 44 trucks carrying over 1,000 tons of food aid from the World Food Program have crossed from Turkey to northern Aleppo through the Bab el-Salam border crossing. UNICEF, WFP, and the World Health Organization, with the support of community health workers, continue to screen children and breastfeeding women for malnutrition across the country. In the cities of Homs and Hama, UNICEF and its partners have deployed mobile teams to provide nutrition services following the return of thousands of families. In the Northeast, more than 20 medical mobile units are providing primary health consultations and support for critical cases in collective centers in Al-Raqqa, Al-Hasakeh governorates, and Ain al-Arab district. And over the past week, more than 6,300 patients received medical consultations. However, Underfunding is affecting the health response, and OCHA tells us that in the Northwest, nearly half of 60 emergency obstetric and newborn care facilities are facing imminent financial risks, putting the survival of pregnant mothers and newborns at risk. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina J. Mohammed, will travel later today to attend the 19th seminar for special and personal representatives and envoys of the UN Secretary General. Following the seminar, she will travel to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, arriving on Sunday, the 26th of January, to attend the Africa Heads of State Energy Summit on behalf of the Secretary General and meet with senior government officials and stakeholders. During the Deputy Secretary General's engagements, she will aim to raise ambition of national commitments to provide energy access to 300 million people across Africa and strengthen action with partners to implement a sustainable and fair energy transition. The Deputy Secretary General will return to New York next Wednesday. We have an update from our peacekeeping colleagues in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who are deeply concerned by the deteriorating security situation in the country's east. In recent days, the M23 armed group, which has continued to occupy new territories in North Kivu province, reportedly seized Minova yesterday. Minova is a critical hub along the supply route to Goma. Also in North Kivu, the peacekeeping mission reports that heavy clashes persist between the M23, the Congolese armed forces, and other armed groups, particularly near Sake. Yesterday, fighting in Bweramana claimed at least 10 lives, triggering displacement flows towards Kalehe and South Kivu, as well as to Goma and Rusayo, while exchanges of mortar shells continue to threaten men, women, and children in sites for displaced people in the area. Since Saturday, the armed group has captured other localities in South Kivu, resulting in casualties and the displacement of over 250,000 people. Following MONUSCO's withdrawal from South Kivu in June 2024, UN peacekeepers are no longer present in the province. MONUSCO reiterates that it is imperative that the group lay down its weapons and abide by the ceasefire in place since the 4th of August. The peacekeeping mission also urges all parties to remain committed to the Luanda process. On Sudan, our colleagues in the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs are deeply concerned about the impact of a series of reported drone attacks on civilians and critical civilian infrastructure in the northern, eastern, and central areas of the country. Today, an attack reportedly targeted the Dabakir power station around Kosti, south of the capital, Khartoum. This follows another reported strike on a power station in northern state earlier this week, which disrupted electricity and water supplies to the capital, Dongola, and surrounding areas. Attacks were also reported over the weekend. This included an attack on a hydroelectric facility at the Greba Dam in Kassala State on January 18th, which knocked out power to hospitals and healthcare facilities, as well as drone attacks that same day on power stations in Gedaref and Sennar states. A week ago, a reported attack on the Merowe Dam, which is the largest dam in the country, severely disrupted water and electricity in Khartoum, northern, and River Nile states. OCHA says that major cuts to water and power risk depriving people of access to critical health services and safe water supplies. We stress that under international humanitarian law, the parties have a clear obligation not to attack objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population. They must also take all feasible precautions to avoid and minimize incidental civilian harm. Turning to Somalia, our colleagues in the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that we, along with our partners, and together with the government, today launched the 2025 Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan. It aims to support some 4.6 million of the most vulnerable people in the country with humanitarian and protection assistance. These efforts will require $1.43 billion. Our humanitarian colleagues note that Somalia continues to face a complex, protracted humanitarian crisis fueled by conflict, insecurity, poverty, widespread displacement, climate shocks, disease outbreaks, and lack of access to basic services. Nearly 6 million Somalis are estimated to need humanitarian assistance in 2025, with women, girls, and marginalized communities particularly vulnerable. Despite major access challenges, humanitarian organizations managed to reach 3.5 million people in Somalia last year, with at least one form of assistance. The country is now experiencing widespread dry conditions following poor October to December rains. Our humanitarian colleagues say that at least 4.4 million people face high levels of acute food insecurity, and 1.6 million children are likely to suffer from acute malnutrition through July. Tomorrow, At 1 p.m., the Holocaust and United Nations Outreach Program Education, along with UN publications, will host a book launch and discussion with Professor Deborah Dwork, the author of Saints and Liars. The launch will take place at the UN Bookshop and will be broadcast live on the UN Publications Facebook page. This is one of many events hosted by the Holocaust and UN Outreach Program ahead of the International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust. And last, in the past couple of days, we've had 7 additional payments to the regular budget. We thank our friends in Australia, Azerbaijan, Finland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Ukraine for their checks, which takes us up to 24 fully paid up nations. And with that, I'll take your questions. Edie first.
Thank you, Farhan. You said that the Secretary General had bilateral meetings in Davos. Can you tell us who the meetings were with?
I believe the first couple of meetings have already happened. Those are with the head of the Inter-American Development Bank and with President Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
And I assume you'll keep us updated on that. I might have missed it. Is he coming back here from Davos, or is he traveling elsewhere?
Well, I just mentioned the DSG's travels, which sync up with the SG's, because they will both be attending the 19th seminar for special and personal representatives and envoys of the Secretary General. So that'll take a few days, but he should be back at the start of next week.
And on a completely different subject, can you get us an update on whether there are any new UN efforts to try to bring the warring parties in Sudan together?
I mean, what I can tell you is on this that Ramdane Lamamra, our envoy, continues with his efforts. I don't have any particular progress to say about those efforts, but he continues to be in touch with the parties and do what he can to bring things back together.